To say that we wander through the ashes of our civilization is obvious, young souls especially as they try to make sense of what and where to go to from here. A great video was posted by an 18-year-old young man detailing some of the specific instances of what he had witnessed during his time in high school. I won't list them out to you, as you really should watch it and hear it for yourself, but if this is what's documented, even if anecdotally, one can imagine or relate to what might have been seen in their own public school, particularly one that is not nearly as rural as his. However, the biggest part that Mr. Turnipseed mentions is the reaction many in his generation have to the fact that no one has grounding, to where those that try and find meaning and purpose in their lives will thrash and fail. And in this thrashing, one might speedrun, so to speak, on various theologies, religions, epistemologies, and political organizations until the zealotry burns out and what is left is just the black-pilled husk of a young man or woman with nothing to live for. While this commentary from my cohort is primarily targeted at Generation Z, the Zoomers, it is something that I find equally applicable to those who are older, overly online, or even urban. This is not to say that flyover Americans or rural readers out there are necessarily immune. After all, I live in the middle of nowhere in a rural red state, and I can tell you that those in their mid-20s and younger, a generation now raised in the atomizing cyberspace that has been a go-to tool for their parents to abdicate parental responsibility, and thus are just as addled as anyone who is terminally online or is the unfortunate urbanite bugman. For those searching for some deeper meaning, what needs to be done to avoid this thrashing? How would one like to accomplish a sense of familial or cultural identity, tradition, and something outside of the online world, their workplace, voting habits, etc., to identify with? To make sure that there is something more teleological than material that you leave behind on this earth, because as the phrase goes, memento mori. This requires you to realize that maybe the seemingly endless cycle of work, commuting, jerking it, swiping on your phone, and filling the void with anything but requires some change. I am not the one who can give you that wake-up call, at least definitively, although I may try, nor can I tell you that I'll fix your material concerns, but rather provide an opportunity to make the most of what you can do to improve the way you view yourself, giving you a chance to pass something down. So today we will explore this rather daunting inquiry in hopes for the chance that one might be able to seek tradition that actually manifests itself into your being, rather than just the bio of your Twitter or Instagram account. I can expect that many would view this sort of post as some kind of self-help argument, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of call, and perhaps that is a fair criticism. However, I am trying to create some sort of mechanism that doesn't have you coming back to me for life advice. I'm no fan of therapists, or at least the ones that believe in medicating and pathologizing the problem away. For spiritual advice, I am no priest, and that is something I think that you should consider, if at the very least you're serious about religion. I have no problem if you're agnostic or atheistic. We all were at some point, myself included, but I will pray for your conversion. The unfortunate commodification of advice and self-help guides has led to an endless amount of books that look like this. Downright detestable, no? I can assure you, though, that you won't find anything like that here at Prudent Observations. I am far too young to be doing anything that resembles some kind of Uncle Prude. And while everything is certainly screwed to some degree, that does not mean that we can look for ways and means to rediscover that lost sense of meaning, belonging, and direction. I can certainly hope that this might be some prospective steps that can lead you to living some sort of better life in this aimless economic zone that has become our modern world. Although I will tell you now that this is not going to be some silver bullet or a bottle of 47 red pills. So, let's begin. Step 1. Touch grass. As much as this phrase gets touted by those who are online or something merely to shut you up and shut you down, there is some validity to it, and it is advice that you should probably heed. Why should you go outside and touch grass, as the phrase so often goes? There is a difference between what you say online and what you actually do. As cliché as it sounds, and I often find that the phrase cliché is nothing more than a slur against tradition, your actions speak louder than words. Our social media, both in the methods to commodify our ideas, personas, and product, whether that be a podcast or a Substack, is typically not a reflection of your real life, aside from those online who are using their real names. Even then, however, our Twitter accounts, Facebook pages, and Instagram accounts are merely the carefully selected and cherry-picked ideas of ourselves, our ideas, and the lives that we want you to think that we actually lead. This isn't some newfound idea. In fact, it has been repeated since the invention of the public cult of personality, if not older. For many of us, especially those of us who have social media accounts and not living like good old Uncle Ted, are exposed to a world that eventually becomes our sense of reality. The phrase, touch grass, should be seen as a call to disassociate yourself from the Skinner box hyper-reality tool that is usually in your pants pocket at all times. Changing your bio to have a current set of identities to reflect your preferred in-group preference doesn't mean anything for how you actually act and live offline. After all, as the old meme goes, on the internet, nobody knows you're actually a dog. Lao Tzu's quote, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know," end quote, is aptly appropriate for this online sphere. The other consequence of the state of being overly online is that there is no moral or social grounding whatsoever. This also applies for the rootless cosmopolitan in real life. The online sphere is a fantastic way to go down the rabbit hole, left or right. This image, which I have below, was taken from a cursory search from the phrase, quote, "my political compass over the," end quote, into the Twitter search bar. And as the profile bio tells us, this individual is 22 years old. This isn't meant to call the person out at all, especially as our late teens and early 20s can expose us to new experiences that may change our perspective. The young and those in their 20s, however, are the most vulnerable to anchoring themselves to whatever in-group seems to have the most appeal, or if it has the most novelty. Which is how you can see accounts, individuals, turn on a dime based on social agreeableness while happily shedding prior convictions, or doubling down in order to belong. This does have a series of consequences, both in real life, as much as I love the acronym IRL, I don't want to use it here, as well as for your online self. At a certain point, when the zealotry of your newfound conversions finally end, you are left to look at the face in the dark screen as you turn your phone off. Who are you? What are you? The existential dread so many millennials and zoomers seem to have, which eventually gets self-diagnosed or manifests in various forms of mental illnesses and other identities, illustrates how important the point of this section actually is. The fact that you will easily become the man who lives to 75 only to die at 25, living the rest of your life aimlessly, engaging and furthering yourself for the hottest and usually crappiest takes and positions for the sake of scratching an itch that can no longer be satiated. Twitter and other social media platforms are like pornography. Take that statement and act accordingly. Use these resources wisely. This does not mean a complete abandonment of your online life, persona, or anything that you do on here. While we all wish to have a cabin in the woods in the middle of Montana, most of us know that we can't go back to the days of even 2011, let alone 1971. These nodes of communication and proliferation of your ideas are an excellent tool to network and create, while also learning from others who have managed to succeed in finding balance as well as meaning. In a world and time period where social interactions in the real world are hampered by disastrous anti-social policies abound by our respective governments, many are going to find community online. Self-discipline is the hardest tool in your toolbox to acquire, and it is one that is increasingly lacking. While I'm speaking anecdotally here, I'm sure you know someone, or are maybe even friends with someone, who moves from one hobby or interest to another in rapid succession. My ex-girlfriend called it being on a kick. That marshmallow test is a bitch, isn't it? However, if you can identify what you plan to do, which should be the first step before engaging in any of these pieces of advice, it should make the use of these resources to serve as a boon to your own goals. What is your plan? What is your purpose? Don't expect me to give you one. I'm not Jordan Peterson, nor am I God. What I can do, however, is provide with you some highlights based on my own experiences online, in addition to the actual networking I do when I'm not on my phone or behind a computer screen. Some notes. 1. Treat the online space as you would an actual business networking mixer. Seriously, if you don't work in marketing, guess what you should do? Especially if you run a channel, stack, or podcast, or even an actual political or religious organization. The best kind of marketing is to put out good work, but it never helps to remind people of what you actually do. Have an elevator pitch. If you want to have really good practice, ask your boss, or if you're self-employed, to go ahead and take the time to go to your local Chamber of Commerce's business networking event, even if it is virtual. I have gone to hundreds of these things, no exaggeration, and if you can master the ability to move from group to group, making friends and connections about what it is you do or who you represent, it translates very well online. While I am certainly not the best example, I am trying my best to get there. 2. Verify, then trust. Being new to it all can certainly make this a daunting task if you're looking for purpose or meaning. However, if you aren't an anon, what makes it a little bit easier is to use the normie options that are before you. You want to find religion or a church nearby? Use Facebook. You want to find a hobby, like maybe getting your ass beat and bruised in historically accurate armor? Go ahead and look it up. If you're an anon, such as myself, you will need to verify whoever you're speaking to or interacting with on a regular basis that is someone that you can trust to either plan some sort of venture with or to engage with on the outside of these online spaces that you work in so often. It is easier if you have worked with face-fag dissidents, or so I'm told. There have been wonderful events and chapters made within organizations from people who operate anonymously, but again, verify and then trust at your own discretion. Overall, you must utilize the resources that are in front of you to the best of your means and ability if you wish to seek community or a sense of purpose. The best practice so many use to just tweet out, post, and make videos is not going to be the way forward, especially if you're not going there with any further goals than to simply speak into the void. That is helplessness. If you're going to make an organization, network, and advertise, you must do this. If you're only doing it solely for yourself, then this last section is for you. Step 3. Speak less, act more. While by no means does this mean do not celebrate if you manage to succeed in finding community, faith, or meaning from the automated autonomy-amassing association that is our modern world, I am warning about the dangers of living falsely or living a double life. To bring up Lao Tzu's quote again, "He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know." End quote. In the case of making any lifestyle change aside from the celebration of milestones or bringing others to your fold, the saying goes, "He who has become does not speak loudly. He who speaks loudly has not yet become." I have observed the most diligent in their lifestyle choices and faith, aside from those that I have referenced earlier, are quite mum on the changes, especially as they undertake them. Much like Instagram influencers, I have found that the ones that advertise a careful facade to keep up the image are not taking their alleged lifestyle, meaning, faith, or identity as seriously as they claim. The constant problem with self-commodification is the inevitable loss of the sense of oneself and one's humanity for the desire of clout, money, or just plain old attention. However, this rule or advice should be closely coordinated with the suggestion of verify, then trust. If one is not willing to at least explain where they are coming from, or the logic of their position, how is one to discern the viability that they might be a good faith actor? Plenty of high follower accounts can be astroturfed, not to mention the innate distrust one might have for a blue checkmark. This suggestion is only a temporary one as you begin to find yourself and ground yourself in the traditions and communities that you have created or have become a member of. The last thing you, or anyone else, needs to deal with is someone who is there for the performance of it, with anything being remotely authentic at all. If you're doing something for the gram, you have clearly failed, but if you can recognize that you have failed, then good. This does not necessarily mean you have to abandon it or start the project from scratch. It is very much a process. However, such observations can also be applied to those who have found themselves established in their faith or habituation of their self to look over others as some kind of mentor. As one of the first accounts to give me any real advice in the online world, he had said that mentorship is key. It isn't something that is particularly broadcasted either, it is best done privately. DMs are a special place, aren't they? Eventually, you will find a new sense of direction, and you will be able to be like those that can speak about their transformations, conversions, as well as advertise the communities that they are now in the traditions they practice. Silence, modesty, and humility are all golden. It is best to practice them until you have reached that necessary level of comfort to know exactly where you're at and what to do next. From individualism to community. As an individual begins to wake up and realize that there is something innately missing from their life, these steps might be necessary in order to achieve some greater sense of identity and community. So often do we see the callous and presumptuous bugman claim that he or she is enlightened, that the basic duties of any man are no longer necessary for themselves in their civil traditions, or that of any actual faith, or that reproduction won't be necessary in the wake of their own eschatology. They won't call it that, but that's exactly what it is, mainly due to climate change. I can certainly hope that I provide you, both here as well as on my channel, some of the reasons to wake up. However, we all have our own journey to make. You may end up as a Catholic, a Baptist, or just someone who wants to find their place so they can engage with their own inner warrior spirit. Once you realize, as Bronze Age pervert would say, that you are gay, then the real work begins, so to speak. And while these musings and potential steps have been most helpful for me, perhaps they can have a similar impact on yourself. The atomized individual must realize that in this world of late-stage liberalism, that the only way out from here is to make him or herself return to the social and teleological traditions of the past, while walking backward into whatever the future may hold, whether that be collapse or something greater. The call to belong to something greater than the self is one of the oldest instincts that we humans have as social creatures. Just looking at those around you, who are lost in their own hyper-reality-inducing Skinner boxes, should be a sign that you don't want to end up like them. Maybe one day you too can write about the steps that you took to show us how you got to a point in life where you are successful, based, and looking towards the future in your own grand traditions and faith. Until then, subscribe now.